Somebody give me a go sign and we'll go. Okay?
Stand by.
I want to be sure you guys are ready. Guys all good? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm going to use some prepared notes right now because I have a lot of emotion running through me over this incident, and I want to be sure I get to say what needs to be said as mayor of the city and county. So I want to start off by saying we're angry, frustrated, and deeply saddened at this unnecessary loss of life and suffering. It's a tragic way to start off the new year. What should have been a night of joy and celebration has instead become one of sorrow and heartbreak for our community. And my heart goes out to the families grieving the loss of loved ones and the dozens of people who were senselessly injured. No one should have to endure such pain due to reckless and illegal activity. This incident is a painful reminder of the danger posed by illegal fireworks. They put lives at risk, they drain our first responders, and they disrupt our neighborhoods. But most heartbreakingly, this tragedy was entirely preventable. New Year's Eve should be a time of joy, not danger. Yet the growing prevalence of illegal fireworks on our island has turned it into a night of risk and devastation. Year after year, this threat persists, and it must stop. I want to extend my deepest gratitude, I mean my deepest gratitude to our first responders, law enforcement officers and emergency personnel who worked tirelessly throughout the night last night to assist those in need. Their efforts were nothing short of heroic. But the burden on them is unacceptable. We cannot continue to put their safety and well-being at risk. You know, we've all seen the videos, illegal aerial fireworks lighting up the skies. I certainly saw it last night from my lanai. This is not an issue of isolated ground enforcement by HPD. I want to be clear about that. This is not an issue of ground enforcement by HPD. This is a systemic problem. Every aerial firework is illegal, and this means we need to address the root cause, shutting down the pipeline of illegal fireworks entering our islands. So let me be clear. Enough is enough. This situation is out of control, and it cannot be allowed to continue. We will not allow it to continue. Our administration is committed to taking decisive action. We will coordinate with federal and state agencies to strengthen law enforcement, impose tougher penalties, explore new technologies because they exist, and implement a united effort to stop the import of illegal fireworks into our harbors and airports. Our communities deserve better. Our people deserve better. We cannot allow this senseless danger to persist, and we will take decisive action to ensure the safety and well-being of our Oahu residents. I am personally very grateful that Governor Green agreed to be here to share his thoughts, his perspectives, but as I just alluded to, we will combine and work with the state and the federal government and anybody else. This is an unprecedented event, as you will learn today from our first responders. This is so horrific. This needs to be a seminal moment, education for our community and for the well-being and lives of the people who live here. With that, I'm introduce Governor Green.
Aloha. Can't say Happy New Year because of what's happened. I believe I agree with absolutely everything that the mayor's just said. I want to break a few things down for people. So yes, first of all, it's heartbreak. It's heartbreak that we are experiencing loss of 4 people at least. At least 3 are dead from the explosion in Salt Lake, another from an explosion in a different part of the county. And in addition to the 4 people that are dead, there are terrible injuries right now. More than 20 people have have already begun to receive life-sustaining treatment over at Queens and Straub and Kaiser. It was absolutely heroic what Jim and his team, police and fire, did last night. They have shared with you over the years the exercises that we do for mass casualty events. This was now not an exercise, this was an actual mass casualty event where they had to get people in just minutes to our most extraordinary hospitals to save people's lives. Jim will explain what it was like to make life and death decisions for those that could be saved or couldn't be saved. So admiration for them. A brief experience, I covered the hospital for many years on Big Island. One time, a family bought I guess, former use military turret, and they were dropping aerials into the turret. They didn't know that there was an unexploded ordnance in there, which went off and blew half of a 13-year-old's face off, and damaged his eye forever. And the nurses saved his life that night, and the medics on Big Island. So we've been seeing these events when people do terrible things and make terrible mistakes, but it's gotten out of control, as the mayor has described. This is no longer us holding small fireworks and bottle rockets in Hilo. This is a different situation altogether. It was a cake bomb, essentially. It was a bomb last night. It was fireworks, but they were put together in a way that they were so explosive, they took the table down, apparently, and then rocketed these fireworks into other caches of fireworks. So when you guys get access ultimately to what is a crime scene, you will see a house that has been bombed, and it's just extraordinary. There's organic material from our loved ones on the windows of the buildings across the street and the cars. I mean, that's what our first responders had to deal with this morning at 12:01 a.m. So I walked the site. It is absolutely tragic beyond what you can imagine, and it's going to keep happening if we don't get smarter. So a couple things. We want people to pause. We are here in the middle of a week. We have a weekend coming up. Please do not do any aerials this weekend. You will be risking people that are around. You will be risking the psyche of the first responders that have just gone through this process and saved many lives. Don't do it. Don't do it. We're going to set up an amnesty program again to have you give back fireworks. We've been doing that these last couple of years. Don't do it. Don't have any more of these fireworks shows until we can all come to terms with what the risk is. So pause, please. In addition to that amnesty, actions have to be taken, like the mayor said, and this can't just be legislated, though. I want everyone to know. It's very likely we will be proposing penalties that will be Class C felonies for anything over 50 pounds of fireworks. We'll debate that at the legislature. We've already heard from legislators just in this first 12 hours. But right now, people are taking terrible risks with other family members and the community. Soon, you'll probably be taking a risk with your own freedom. I don't think anybody should want to go to jail for 5 years or pay tens of thousands of dollars of fines. Love your family. Avoid this. Let us put on firework displays in the community. Let us spend the monies to have something special for our citizens, which is what we've been proposing. No more fireworks shows on back streets across our state. I know that this is a deep and important cultural tradition to many people to have some celebration with minor fireworks on New Year's and 4th of July, but it's taking the lives of young people. I think that there is very likely going to be 1 or 2 children under age 10 that will either be forever disfigured or dead in the coming hours. Leave that to Queen Straub and Jim to talk about. That could have been any of our grandchildren, could have been any of our children. I went and talked to the people on the street. They're scared beyond belief about what could have happened. The way the blast went, it blasted outward like this, and it took the houses in front of it and the cars in front of it. The houses on the sides, amazingly, didn't feel the brunt of this explosion. Could have been the whole block if we were even less lucky. So look, we are doing a few things. We've been intercepting and seizing thousands and thousands of pounds of fireworks, but still not enough. The task force intercepted 187,000 pounds of illegal fireworks in 23, more than 40,000 pounds in 2024. Tons of shipments have been diverted. But let's just be honest, we will never be able to catch all this stuff. So you have to help us. Help your neighbors make the right decisions to not put your family in harm's way. There has got to be a better way. Again, the mayor's right. There's technology that can be brought to bear. There are laws that can be put in place. But truth be told, we will never have enough medics. We will never have enough police to stop all of the activities that's been going on. And the final thing I'll say is everyone remembers the fire that occurred about 15 months ago. We could have had 30 fires last night with this amount of fireworks, and there would be no way that the fire departments could respond to them. And that could have been several houses burning, middle of the night, taking people's lives. We no longer live in a climate, in an era where we can afford to take that kind of fire risk. That's why penalties are going to have to be very, very severe for people that use large amounts of fireworks, because frankly, it's not that different than being a super drunk driver, making everyone else at risk when you're on the road. Now you are potentially burning down someone's community and the next door neighbor. And they're probably trying to sleep on New Year's, and they could be burned to death, not to mention the tragic incident that happened with the explosion. So God bless everybody, but thank goodness we have a mayor that doesn't take any nonsense. And it's going to have to be very, very serious going forward. So please just partner with us on this one, and let's not do aerial fireworks anymore unless professionals are doing them. Aloha.
Thank you, Governor. Jim Ireland from the Honolulu Emergency Services Department. I just want to go through briefly what happened with this incident from the EMS perspective. We were going through a fairly ordinary night up until that point. We did have 2 or 3 significant firework injuries where people had lost parts of their hand. I think one very critical injury, some traffic accidents, a few people hit by cars, but nothing really out of the ordinary for a New Year's Eve. 12:01 happened, and our communications center received 2 911 calls, and sounded a little ominous at first because one of the calls reported four victims. So 4 victims is a little unusual for a isolated firework accident. So our team responded. Our Assistant Chief of Operations, Jeff Zuckernick, who's here today, responded along with a EMS District Chief Shara Molina, as well as our IAEA ambulance. And they actually got to scene quite quickly. At that point, and I'm going to describe the scene a little bit, but the incident, as you know, was at 4137 Keaka Drive. We couldn't get all the way up to the house because, as you can imagine, in a neighborhood when there's a party, both of sides of the street were lined with cars. And so really there was only one narrow path for any vehicle down the middle of this street. So they staged at Pakini Street and Keaka Drive, and were met by the first patients. And with the first ambulance pulled in, it wasn't just 4 or 6 patients. It was 5, and then 10, and then 15, and then early estimates were at least 20 patients, and all very, very severely injured, critical burns, pleading for help surrounding the initial ambulance. So Chief Zuckernick and Molina called for really an all-call for reinforcements. So we started sending the first of 10 city ambulances to this scene, from Kailua, from Hawaii Kai, from Wahiawa, from downtown, really every available ambulance there. We also called for mutual aid from the Federal Fire Department, and they were able to respond with a battalion chief, 2 engines, and 3 of their Federal Fire Department ambulances. Now those 13 ambulances made up the transport of the injured from that scene. One Federal Fire Department ambulance made 2 trips, so they went to the hospital and came back and got more patients. So really we used 14 ambulances to transport patients, but it was 13 physical ambulances. So at that point, then I was alerted. I got out to the scene about 12:15 or so. Our Deputy Director, Ian Santee, came, as well as our paramedic supervisor, who's also here, Sonny Johnson. Another district chief showed up, came to the scene as well, Kenneth Faria. So we had our leadership team there, as well as a large number of ambulances. Now, because there were so many patients, this was what we consider a mass casualty incident. So the team, again, because the house and the devastation, and we also weren't sure if there was more unexploded. I mean, we assumed it was a firework incident, but we weren't for sure in the first few minutes. It could have been anything, really. And so we, because of the congestion at the scene, because of the devastation and the unsure nature of this, we actually, the initial commanders on the scene elected to set up a triage area at Bikini Street and Keaka Drive, which is maybe 2 or 3 houses from the house that was involved. And they collected the patients there. And what they did, and this is standard in mass casualty incidents for EMS, is they did triage. So they would assign people red for critical, yellow for serious, or green for minor injuries or walking wounded. And what was significant about this event is there were just so many in the red category. Of the 21 patients we transported to hospitals, most of them were considered red or critical. We estimate approximately 10 to 15 additional patients in the green category or minor injuries. And because our focus there was saving lives and saving lives with our partners in the fire department and the police department, it's standard for us to have the minorly injured patients wait while we address the critical patients, the critically injured who are in danger of losing their life. So some of those, and many of those patients then said, well, can we just drive our children to the hospital? Can we take them to Kapiolani? Can my friend take me to the hospital? And we said yes to all that. Yes, you have minor burns, you have minor shrapnel injuries. Definitely you can take a private car. Now, once we had taken care of all the critical patients and addressed all their needs and got them off the scene, if any of those patients with minor injuries needed EMS to take them to the hospital, then we would have actually taken all them. So because they either went home and did self-care or took themselves to ERs, we did not actually transport a lot of patients with minor injuries. But I remember a 12-year-old girl with burns on her legs and some shrapnel, and some family members with shrapnel, and then just a lot of kind of 30s and 40-year-old walking wounded, so to speak, that found their own ways to the hospital. So that triage point, to get from the scene to the triage point, again, it was about two houses away, but this is where our partnerships were critical with the fire department, both Honolulu Fire Department and the Federal Fire Department and the police department, because firefighters and police officers took it upon themselves to use these sling devices that we can use to move patients. They have handles on them from the scene to the collection point where the paramedics and the paramedic supervisors could do triage. From that point, the triage supervisor decided then who was going to go to the hospital first. Our dispatch arranged which hospitals were going to take which patients. So all of this was going on simultaneously, and I really can't say enough also about our dispatch staff. We shift change at midnight, which in a way it was fortunate because everybody in dispatch who was supposed to get off at midnight didn't leave. So we had a double number of dispatchers going into the night to help us manage this incident. And they all stayed. I'm just so proud of just their actions, because what they were doing behind the scenes is talking to all the hospitals. Queens, how many critical patients can you take? Straub, how many critical burn patients can you take? Kaiser, Kuakini, et cetera. So they touched base with every hospital on Oahu simultaneously while our teams were doing the triage and now starting the transport. Now the other issue at this scene was these roads now were filled with police cars, supervisors, fire trucks, personnel, victims, and we just could not get the ambulances up into that scene. They would have gotten trapped or congested. So what we elected to do then is set up Salt Lake Boulevard at Bikini Street as the transport hub. So the triage hub was about 2 blocks from the actual scene, and that transport hub was maybe another 2 blocks, a block or two from where they were doing the triage. So again, the teams, some EMS teams did this, but the majority of the patients moved from that triage collection point down to where the ambulances were staged along Salt Lake Boulevard was made possible by the really dozens and dozens of police officers and firefighters there working with us, moving patients from point A to point B, from point B to point C. So as we collected the critical patients down where the ambulances were staged, an ambulance would pull up, and then we would immediately sign them, okay, this is your patient, this is your patient. As the physician on the scene, I would give them a brief report. This one has critical airway burns, they need this, this one needs that, and we very expeditiously worked together to save lives and get people transported to the hospital. And this, because of our working relationships, went without a lot of discussion. Everybody just seemed to know what to do, and that made it run so much more smoothly. Police knew what to do, fire knew what to do, EMS knew what to do, and we all worked very well together. You know, police immediately shut off Salt Lake Boulevard for us so we could stack up 6 or 8 ambulances and block roads and keep our paramedics safe from that. So from that point, it was determined initially that there were 2 people within the scene who were deceased, who we weren't able to save. And, you know, that's heartbreaking for us. But of the 21, we initially reported 20, but it was actually 21 people who came down through the triage that were deemed mostly critical. 14 were transported by Honolulu EMS, and 6 were transported by Federal Fire Department ambulances. And again, no one hospital can handle all those patients. All of them had burns. Many of them also had shrapnel injuries. And so even though we have a level 1 trauma center at Queens and a level 3 trauma center at Polimomi, there's no way they could handle all of them. Straba's our burn center. There's no way they could handle 21 critical patients all at once. So what our dispatchers did very smartly, and again, they're trained to do this and have protocols, they found out exactly who could go where. And for instance, if a burn patient went to a non-burn center, that ER could stabilize them, and then this morning and today, transfer them to the burn ICU at Straub after they've been stabilized in that other ER. So we literally utilized 4 or 5 downtown hospitals to take care of all these patients. Now, at this time, there's still stuff going on all over town, other injuries, heart attacks, the normal medical stuff we go to. So then what we did is we called on the other remaining ambulances in the city then to use other hospitals other than those ones getting inundated from this event that were a little further out to kind of take the rest of the 911 transport patients from Oahu. So again, I'm just very proud of our team. I'm very proud of the collaboration with the other agencies. But at the same time, it's a really sad day for me because I saw the families, I saw the patients, I saw their anguish, and it's just heartbreaking. And this, again, didn't have to happen, but our teams were very professional. But again, it was just very, very sad. And it's going to be tough for these families going forward, and there's going to be a healing process. And I never want to see this again, frankly. Fire Chief.
Aloha, good afternoon. Kalani Hao, Fire Chief of the Honolulu Fire Department. As Director Ireland stated, it's a very unfortunate and sad way for us to start our new year. A lot of people impacted and affected, and I want to send out our condolences and prayers to everyone that is affected because they're going to need our support to kind of get through this. As far as the fire department role, as Director Ireland stated, we did get the call at or around midnight. Initially, the calls came in. The information that was provided was a very few information, so we only responded with 1 unit each with EMS and HFD. And upon arriving to the scene, we, discovered the actual scope of the incident and the large explosion. It really looked like a war zone, and a bomb pretty much dropped right in front of that house. So, like Director Ireland stated, we initiated, dispatched a whole lot more of resources. We sent a total of 9 other resources from HFD, and luckily our conditions at the time, there were no fires upon arriving at the scene, so we were able to focus all of our efforts on patient care. We did a search and rescue of the building that was affected and the surrounding area, and during that search is that we found one of the patients that actually deceased at the incident. And like Director Ireland stated, very proud of the work that our personnel did in working together with all the other first responding agencies. But I wanted to kind of touch on what the mayor stated. Fireworks is a very sensitive issue within our community, whether to allow legalization or not. But with everyone here in the public safety community, the safety and well-being of our community is our #1 priority, and also with our personnel. And I think people have to take a step back and take a look at that. We want to make sure that everyone goes home at the end of the day. And I think that I know everyone has that same thing in common. Our community does care for each other and want to make sure that the safety and well-being of their neighbors, their families are of the top priority. So I think it's something that changes are going to have to be made. Like the mayor said, we cannot allow something like this, this tragedy at this level to happen again. We have to learn from our mistakes, and I hope that some sort of legislation and work can be done to prevent this from happening in the future. I'm going to pass it on to Chief Logan.
Aloha, good afternoon, Governor, Mayor, and members of the media. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. You know, our prayers go out to the community and all those that are tragically involved from this fireworks incident. To echo what the mayor and the governor and the other first responders have said is, you know, very bad, poor decision-making by members of our community who decided to take fireworks and use them in a manner that's not professional, trained individuals. And now we have the incident we have. And it's tragic, should never happen, should have never happened. We're doing a preliminary investigation into the incident. Please remember that everything I talk about today is preliminary and in that subject to change as the investigation continues. On Wednesday, January 1st, 2025, shortly after midnight, the Honolulu Police Department officers co-responded with our EMS and fire department personnel to Keaka Drive address on multiple people injured in fireworks. The initial responding patrol officer determined that New Year's Eve party had been going on in the carport area and individuals were lighting fireworks that resulted in an explosion. 2 adult females were pronounced dead at the scene, and adults and some juveniles were transported to neighboring hospitals. Based on the preliminary review and nearby surveillance footage, evidence from the scene and witness statements, it appears that shortly after midnight, a person who attended the party lit an aerial cake, which is a container containing multiple aerial fireworks, in the driveway at the carport. The cake fell to the side, and the aerial shot into crates that contained additional fireworks, setting off what is the explosion that you saw on multiple media outlets and social media posts. At this time, it appears that 23 adults and 3 juveniles are seriously and critically injured, transported to aerial hospitals. There may have been additional people that walked to or admitted themselves into the hospital, as mentioned by Dr. Ireland. At 5 a.m. today, we were notified that one of the critically injured patients, a 23-year-old female, had also passed, so that would be the 3rd individual that passed. The identification of all the deceased will be from the medical examiner's office on a future date. In addition to the 3 fatalities, approximately 24 people were injured. I'd like to thank all the first responders, the initial responders to the scene. One witness who had prior military experience likened it to a war zone. I would ask that any of the first responders and the neighbors that also responded to help to seek any professional counseling that may be required. I know there were peer officers, both by other first responders and HPD, that were there to help the initial officers at the scene. The Honolulu Fire Department, and I understand ATF is involved in the investigation into this matter, and we will continue that investigation for several days and months into the future. I know that I went to the scene later this morning. Our investigators, our patrol initial response, were holding down the scene. Our criminal investigation division was on the scene. Our specialized services division was there to recover the additional fireworks that didn't explode in the fire blast, and to render all that safe for possible future investigations. And so we continue this. I believe they probably released the scene a little while ago. So this is something that happened, many, many hours of investigation for law enforcement, first responders to be on the scene for something, as the mayor and the governor so eloquently stated, should have never happened. Here's an individual that's not a professional, to the best of my knowledge, unprofessional at fireworks, and here we have a tragic loss into a community, and neighbors, families, and friends are now either deceased or in hospitals because of just what appears to be careless acts. So with that, we'll open it up to your questions.
And the person who is known to have lit that cake that eventually fell and caused the explosion be held responsible?
I think the investigation will bear that out as we pursue, but I believe in conversations with the prosecutor's office, if there is an incident that would lead us to the facts and circumstances of providing a criminal act, then yes, we could lead to prosecution.
I had a question for Dr. Ireland. We understand that it was incredibly graphic, very horrific. Limbs were blown apart. What did you see, and what did other first responders see at the scene in terms of injuries?
I personally didn't see anybody who were missing limbs from that incident. We did have people in other incidents around Oahu who lost hands and limbs. But the majority of these patients, just about I think everybody I saw had some degree of burns. And burns are classified by the percentage of surface area, body surface area, that is involved, and folks I saw was anywhere from 10 or 20% up to probably near 90%. Once a burn in general exceeds 80% body surface area, there's approximately less than a 50% chance that you'll survive that. So again, because most of these people were triaged as critical, it was based on usually because of their burn injuries. But again, we did also have people with a lot of shrapnel injuries, because this was not only fire, but it was also a blast. But I just want to be clear, at this incident, I did not, and I don't think we necessarily had anybody with missing limbs, but that is a common finding throughout firework injuries on Oahu anyway, historically, because people are holding them. But very, very gruesome injuries is accurate. And you know, people who work in EMS, who spend their career in EMS, are used to seeing things that are sad and are horrific. But I think even for a lot of people there, this was just because there were so many people that were so badly hurt. It was something that not a lot of us have experienced before, and probably, never want to again. But because of the training and because of people's education and professionalism, they took really good care of everybody. I think saved everybody that could, and it was frustrating that we couldn't save everybody. But the team, again, EMS, working with police and the fire department, were there to save lives, and they did save lives. And it went as well as I could have hoped for how big it was.
Do you know the ages of the deceased and if children were among those injured?
I don't know any of that information. I do know children were injured. I saw children. Children were taken to the hospital. Some of the children had the minor injuries where the parents elected to take them. The one girl I remember was about 12, but I don't have a number on that right now. The other thing too is because people were so badly injured, and some of them couldn't speak, we didn't have IDs. We didn't ask them. We couldn't ask them who they were. So many people, unfortunately, went to the hospital as a John or Jane Doe, identity unknown, age unknown, and that will all be sorted out by the hospital. But our focus there at the scene was saving lives, getting people stabilized, getting them to the emergency room to hand them off to the hospital teams, who also were phenomenal partners last night. I stopped by a few of the ERs after the event, and some of them had called in extra doctors, extra staff. Nobody complained. They were all very professional. They took really good care of people. So we just have a wonderful community that not only the first responders work well together, but we work really well together with the hospitals to save lives.
How many hospitals?
The majority of the patients went to Queens as a trauma center. Patients went to Straub as the burn center. We also asked our ambulances and asked hospitals to accept patients from Kaiser, Kuakini, Tripler, and Polimomi. We, I believe, did not use at that time Queens, Wahiawa, Queens West, or Castle, but we called upon those hospitals at that time and later throughout the night to take care of the rest of the patients on Oahu, no matter where the call was, because we know we had inundated the first mentioned hospitals, I said, with all these critical patients. And staff, they only have so much staff, they only have so many ventilators, they only have so many doctors, and so we called upon those other more peripheral hospitals to take care of kind of everybody else on Oahu, which they did willingly. And so the hospitals, again, were just wonderful partners last night in helping to save people.
Sorry, to clarify, were there any children who were transported to a hospital?
There
Officially.
were, but I don't know the number.
If I want to,
And one more thing, we sent people to Kapiolani as well, the children.
Just because Mayor and I talked about this right before coming in to see you. So you asked the question about what it was like. Okay, the gentle part of it was you're on the scene and you see one boxing glove and you see one Birkenstock shoe from a child, okay? The truth is that people had traumatic injuries so badly that brain material was across the sidewalk from the ferocity of this explosion. And we want people to hear that because that is what is really possible with these explosive fireworks. Now, I know people have the debate year after year after year, don't take our fireworks away. Literally, some of the deceased had injuries that were that tragic, that traumatic. We're talking about the worst possible war zone injuries that took their lives. And that will continue to happen if we don't take, as a society, real action. It's not just losing a finger. It's extraordinarily grotesque events. And in the next couple days, it's highly likely that some of the people that didn't even look that bad will die because their lungs were burned out. And that's what you happen to see when explosions happen right in front of you. So I hope everyone's thinking about this, because it's going to happen again next year and the year after and the year after if we don't, as a society, stop the aerials in communities.
Governor, are you personally going to call for an all-out ban of fireworks?
Going to call at least for a felony offense for any significant cake fireworks. So any fireworks that are beyond what can't cause much harm will be a Class C felony if we have our way. Only one state, to my knowledge, we've been doing some investigation of other states' laws this morning. I believe it's actually Massachusetts that Mayor and I have deep experience with, have done full bans. If that's what's necessary to save lives, we'll pursue that. But right now, our initial thought is anything over 50 pounds, which would be enough to cause an accident like this. Possession of that would be a Class C felony, 5 years in prison, up to $10,000 in fines. So hopefully no one would be willing to put themselves behind bars like that while risking other people's lives.
There are 4 incidents that EMS had sent out of injuries, and I believe you had mentioned 4 people, fatal injuries at the Aliumanu incident, and then another fatality.
3 and 1, it looks like for now. Yeah, 3 at the site, and then 1 at a different site.
The one at the different site, can you confirm which location that was?
It was in the Kalihi area. I'm not sure exactly where. I believe it was near either Mayor Wrights or Farrington High School.
Is that the Lucella Lane one
That
with the
might be-
19-year-old?
Yeah.
That is confirmed.
Well, I'm not, I believe it's that one, but I have to get more information.
And Governor, you mentioned today that there was possibly a child that was critical.
We know that there was a 3-year-old that was severely injured. I believe a 1-year-old that was also severely injured. There was also, some of these adults are kind of kids, 17 and 19 years old. In my mind, those are children. So the truth is, a lot of children had to go to our facilities at White Pacific Health, and they do great care there. Everyone went to the right facilities, or the facilities they could be gotten to quickly to do great care before they went to the ultimate facility for treatment. And most roads lead to Straub as far as burn injuries over time. But the trauma, and there was a significant amount of trauma, because what happens was, you'll see the site eventually, the explosion was enormous, which meant that everything else shot out like shrapnel, like weapons, shooting into other people's houses, into their cars, blowing out the windows, and into people's bodies. And so you have terrible injuries of internal organs, brain injuries. These are projectiles that are essentially like shooting guns off into a crowd, except it's from the explosion. It was a bomb, make no mistake. It was a bomb that exploded. It was a firework bomb. And I'm sure that no one wanted anything like this to happen, but that is the risk you take. And people are drinking, and they're doing drugs at parties, and they're not thinking clearly, and they have this huge amount of explosive packed in a garage. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to us that this is going to happen again. if we don't do something.
Chief Logan, you know, this address where the explosion happened, were there previous complaints or citations from neighbors or issued by HPD to this property or its owners regarding fireworks?
No, not that I can see within our computer systems.
I talked to a neighbor that lives next door, and he says, we don't, you know, why we don't tattle. And he would have liked to, but,
So therein lies an issue. For us to enforce fireworks by individuals, the officer either needs to see the violation happen, and that means the person lighting the firework, illegal firework, and then we can make the arrest or write the citation. Or we need the witness, either with photographs or a statement from the neighbor, saying that I saw so-and-so, my neighbor, who I know, light off this firework, and here's what happened. That's the kind of information that we need to take that to the prosecutor's office, to provide that information for further action within the criminal justice system. And so that's a lot to ask from neighbors, and I know neighbors don't want to tattle, but here you have neighbors, you know, unfortunately, this is an accident that happened, and could it have been, it should have never happened by the decisions that people made to bring the fireworks to that party and then light them on. And that's really the problem. The neighbors, you know, we ask for their help. We ask for their help that are in that area that maybe have cell phone or video camera from their house that may have caught the incident prior to, leading up, and then after. And so we're asking for that information to be forthcoming to the Honolulu Police Department for us to do part of our investigation.
are you going to step up patrols next New Year's Eve?
So
That's
I-
what this guy said. He says we would appreciate more police presence.
Well, the officers are out on patrol. The officers were on calls. They were on several calls for other fireworks incidents. There were no calls, to my knowledge, in that area. So police weren't called for that reason. And then the officers, this was so chaotic that the Kalihi station and the leadership there had to call in people from the outside districts. And so outside district officers had to come in to help them, one, deal with the incident, to provide security, to close off the roads for the traffic, and then to help EMS and fire maneuver the casualties to the ambulances and get them out to the hospitals they needed to be. So I could have more officers on driving around and doing that, but I can't solve a situation like the mayor had said. This is a systemic problem that's cultural. It's been longstanding, and it's not just solved with Honolulu Police Department driving around. This is solved by finding the root of the cause, which is how they get in here and how they're distributed. So go back to Jen, your question, the individual who lit the firework, but also the individuals who brought the fireworks, who maybe bought the fireworks. All of that is part of this investigation that's going to go on, and to ascertain how and when, where these things came from. And that could lead to criminal prosecution. So it's not just the police we'd have to be in the right place at the right time for a lot of this to happen, or to find the individuals, to catch the individuals for a citation or arrest. But it's not having hundreds of thousands of officers on the street to solve this problem. It's finding the root of the problem and stopping the illegal fireworks from entering.
How much would you say you found recovered today?
My understanding, it was tens of thousands of dollars worth of fireworks.
From that one address? Or
Yes,
total?
from the one address.
But you guys need to understand something additionally, okay? The chief is being very modest. Even as they were responding to a mass casualty where there were dead individuals on the scene, people were still shooting aerials up in and around the streets that the police had to drive past. I heard this in person today from some of the residents on the street. They themselves felt shocked that people would still be doing that while these heroes were responding to fatal events right on the street. It's so many people shooting off aerials now that there's not enough police to even imagine dealing with the one-by-one cases. That's why it has to be dealt with systemically. We have to shut it down, or we at least have to limit the scope of the size of these fireworks. No one is worried about small fireworks per se, but people were still shooting off aerials as the medics were driving by.
4 houses down.
4 houses down. I mean, so the audacity of that, while people are trying to save lives and these people are working knowing that there's going to be loss of life, that tells you that it's in people's heads now that they think it's okay. It's not okay. It has to stop, especially the big fireworks. And we'll do all that we can, but it's going to have to be we as people making that decision to not do it. There are other exciting things in life to do. This can't be one of them.
This task force you mentioned earlier had recovered over 200,000 pounds of illegal fireworks over the last year since it was created.
Yeah.
Where does it need to step up its work more?
So-
before next few years.
Yeah, well, one of the many recommendations is amping the penalty so significantly that it really causes a deterrent. But as you've witnessed in the course of the public dialogue, there's really heavy pushback against any change in laws to make it a bigger offense. Usually it takes something tragic like this to get the entirety of society moved to a place like enough is enough. No one's supporting fentanyl in the streets, you know. No one should be supporting, which will kill you and your teens. No one is supporting fireworks now that they know that it can take out a city block. So I hope people, you know, wake up. And as the chief said, we're not a society perhaps of pointing fingers at our neighbors. I get that, but we are a society that demonstrates aloha for our ohana in the community, and this is now clearly a threat. This is not your old firecrackers, you know, in the rural parts of the state, or a cultural statement. This is actually a threat to public safety and health. So we talked about it from the side of asthma and lung disease, because a lot of people have trouble breathing. That's been a concern, but this is a straight trauma concern. And I think most people are going to agree with us that if we don't even have the capacity statewide to deal with a trauma like this, it could have been a lot worse. There could have been a second event across town. There could have been a third event, big. So
You talked about the DOT and Harbor Police.
Yes.
What can you say about what they can do?
yeah, they can bring federal assets to bear. They can actually use the federal government, including FBI, including others, to both investigate and to block the transport of these kind of explosives. You know, one of the concerns we've had with drugs is people mail them in. We catch, say, 1 out of 4 packages, and the rest of the drugs pour in. The same is basically the case with containers. And so we just need help from everybody to stop this. There will be more than ample ways to have fireworks shows legally. We can use tax dollars to sponsor them. It's totally okay. But it's got to stop at this level, because there just aren't enough police, fire, medics to handle the problem. And every couple of years, you're going to have a terrible, terrible event. And sooner or later, you're going to have another fire break out that we will not be able to control. And I don't really want to get into that on this New Year's, but you guys need look no further back than 2023 Maui to know what a fire looks like out of control.
Mayor, you called for shutting down the pipeline of fireworks that's coming here. Could you elaborate more on what you plan to do from the city's end to do that?
Well, there are other ports of authority that implement technology, and some of the things we're really interested in. So I want to leave it at that, because obviously this is a very sophisticated business, highly illegal, highly profitable, will not go away easily. I'd rather defer anything that we're about to do, okay? Except we're going to employ the best tactics we can.
What's this new technology?
I'm going to leave it at that for now.
How many citations or arrests were made last night and in the weeks leading up to in regard to illegal fireworks?
We're pulling that statistics now. I don't have that offhand to answer the question. I know we were responding to multiple calls last night, but how many citations or arrests were made, that I'm not aware of yet.
So
Chief,
at
do you
this-
know how large the cake was and how many aerial fireworks it had? There are some people who don't even know how that works, so can you explain it and how it launched rockets into the garage or carport?
I'm trying to, I saw the scene and I observed it. I mean, there were probably, I don't know, maybe 50 or so individual cartridges within the cake itself. They call it a cake. It looks like a sheet cake from, I won't say who, but a local vendor's. And so that's why they call it an aerial cake. But in that, there's individual, either 8 to 10 smaller cartridges that are within a smaller case. So they could take those out, but they chose to leave it in there and then let it fire off, I guess, one by one. But that wasn't the intent or that might have been the intent, but that's not what happened. Somehow, either it tipped over or a table it was on tipped over based on the high heat it was generated from the fireworks, the cake they call it. And that, once it turned sideways, lit off the rest of the fireworks that were nearby. And that's what caused the mass explosion. So we're still working through that. Kudos to our investigators who are on scene to try to ascertain all that happened with, as you can imagine, the first responders trying to save lives. At the same time, we're trying to find out exactly what happened.
Was the cake homemade?
No, I think it's
Store-bought.
industry bought, yes.
Were there any homemade explosives or fireworks recovered at that property?
I don't recall any homemade fireworks. There were instruments to allow the fireworks to, like aerials, to shoot up in the air that were homemade, but not the fireworks themselves.
And any citations at this site?
Not at this time.
And Chief Howe, you said that the one woman was found, where?
It was my understanding that she was in the carport upon our search and rescue efforts.
And the other woman?
Well, they were
Do we know-
external outside of the building.
Do we know where the other woman was?
Outside, one was on the street and one was on the driveway. I think those were the two deceased at the time. That was my understanding.
One in the street and one on the driveway.
Correct.
And they thrown? Did you think they
I'm
were-
not sure how they ended up where they ended up, but what I understand is the two that was a DOA was out on the exterior portion of the building.
Can you confirm if the women were related?
I do not have that information, sorry.
Ages,
I
possibly?
don't have that information
Ages,
also.
no.
Would you describe everything you found on that property as illegal fireworks, or were there some like legal firecrackers there like attributed or appeared it was just all illegal?
I couldn't ascertain if things were legal. What I could see was a lot of illegal fireworks, boxes, containers, and debris. But I didn't, there were fireworks or firecrackers that were there that might have been legal. But the scene was so chaotic and congested with debris and items from all around the house that I couldn't tell what was what.
Can the homeowner be held responsible?
That's all part of the investigation.
Would you say I'm sorry, air, sea, or mail, the most concerning aspect to potentially get these things into the state?
Correct.
What would you, or all of them are?
I'm sure it's there. I'm sure the people that are bringing in the fireworks or purchasing the fireworks are bringing them in through all of those modals to get illegal fireworks into the state, either by container, by mail, personally bringing them in, if they can carry it either on a boat or in planes and things. So that's the only way you can get here, right? So that's the only way the container. And it sounds easy. Well, then we just shut it off, but it's not that simple. We don't have authority to just open up a container or stop somebody and say, hey, give me your fireworks. We'd have to have a lot more information.
One more question.
All right, thank you all very much.
Did the weather play a factor in last night's activities in your favor?
Not that I know, I don't think so, though. Yeah. Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.